let's just talk about everything I read in June. Let's just forget how late I am. Let's just jump into this. Hello, book friends. It's Alyssa. Welcome back to the channel. Hello if you are new. We are going to talk about everything I read in June. It is late. We're going to go with it. Forget it. I got a new dog. I've been sick. We've been working on projects because we're both finally home and it's not raining, so you can probably hear the power washer going. I am taking this time where I have the house to myself to get some recording done, because if I don't just record these things, you're gonna have nothing to watch. I also do a weekly newsletter over on Substack, so there is a subscription link in the description. If you want to go see everything that I'm reading every week in more up-to-date, real-time kind of stuff, my thoughts as I'm going through some of these books as I'm reading them, and just random things that are happening in my life. Things have been really crazy lately, so I don't really know what's happening with all of my content. I used to make so much book content, and now life is overwhelming, but that's okay. We're going to start here with everything I read in June, and we're gonna get some other stuff done, and you guys are gonna have some content, and that is that. Enough rambling. As always, we are going to start with the book stats for the month. So in the month of June, I read 13 books, which was a nice round number, 4,800 pages. Love that. My moods for the month are pretty much emotional, reflective, adventurous, and sad. I got a little funny in there near the top, right on trend, right on brand. The pace is mostly medium to slow, which is interesting. I did read a couple faster paced books. My page count is predominantly under 300, which I realized when I was going through my spreadsheet and putting the page counts in. I was like, wow, wow. Anyway, so, and then it was either you were under 300 or you were over 500. Very little in between. What a weird month. My nonfiction fiction split is 23% nonfiction, 77% fiction. We were basically working on this 80-20, give or take a couple percentage points, like split all year for some reason. And I'm fine with it. Anyway, and then my genres for the month were literary on top, classics, historical, LGBTQ, romance, and then memoir. And the memoir is not really a memoir, it's just poetry. But anyway, my average star rating, I had a really good month actually. I just put in all my ratings. I went through my spreadsheet and did my call pile. And so I'm a little bit, I wasn't sure what it was going to come out to be. And it's 4.04 stars, which is a really good month. Everything was basically 4 and above. And then I had some wishy-washier books from below 4 stars. Yeah, so those are the stats. Let's move on to my bookly and we can talk a little bit about the books that I read in June. So we're going to start right here at the top with The Secret History by Donna Tartt, which is a reread for me and is part of a very long to film vlog that I am doing. I'm trying to reread everything that Donna Tartt has written to maybe perhaps summon the universe to make her publish a new book, or to convince the universe to convince Donna Tartt to write a new book. Whatever. I have to say that I enjoyed this more on reread than I did the first time, and it felt almost like a fresh read because I didn't remember a lot of detail about this book. I remember like pretty big plot points, but not a lot of the details. So it was fun to kind of get into the trenches and really I really read this like closely this time as opposed to last time. I think I just kind of like skimmed it through. I think I found the characters all incredibly unlikable, and sometimes when the characters are really unlikable, it's very hard for me to connect. I kind of put that to the side because I kind of knew that going in that I wasn't going to necessarily like anybody, and I was able to really just focus on other aspects of the book, and I didn't get so overwhelmed with how much I disliked everybody. And I really enjoyed this. I mean, I still don't understand why this is everybody's like favorite book. All the people, they're like, this is the best book ever. This is the book I recommend to everybody. I don't know. I think maybe it's just for me, other things intrigue me about books and get onto that list. So it's just personal preference, you know, but I still really like it. I get it. I know why it stands the test of time. And yeah, eventually that vlog will come to be. I have to start The Little Friend, which is the only Donna Tartt that I have DNF'd before. So I'm not really motivated to start this, but once I get through The Little Friend, I think it'll be clear sailing because I really did like The Goldfinch. But anyway, So that's that one. I read Susan Scanlon's Committed on Meaning and Mad Woman. Oh, I guess I did have another actual official memoir. So this is Susan Scanlon's sort of memoir about her time in this psychiatric hospital in New York City in the late 90s. That is now not, the program is not the same. This experience is not something that most people will experience now in terms of being institutionalized for like mental health. She was there for a number of years. She has a very interesting experience and it's a very fascinating discussion about mental health, and particularly women in mental health and their mental health and institutionalization. And there's this really interesting discussion of like, once you get diagnosed with something, do you start to then act to your diagnosis? And there's a lot of discussion of literature around women and their mental health issues, like Virginia Woolf and The Yellow Wallpaper and all these other authors that have struggled with their mental health and have been in and out of institutions. And it's a what I think, if this is something that you enjoy reading about, please pick this up. I loved it. I thought this was phenomenal. I really want to read her actual other writings, not just this memoir now. And I still need to sit down and go through all of my highlight tabs, because I tried to highlight in my Kindle all the books and authors she references, because there's a lot of there's like basically a reading list inside of this book if you pull it all together. And if I ever can sit down and do that, I will probably put it up on my Substack. So make sure you subscribe to my Substacks, because I think that would be a really interesting reading list to go through if you like that cross section of like feminist lit, women's lit, and looking at mental health and institutionalization. I think that I find that really interesting, and I think that the books that she talks about sound very interesting. So yeah, anyway, Committed, loved this. Then I read The Unfit Heiress, The Tragic Life and Scandalous Sterilization of Anne Cooper Hewitt. And this was okay. Every time I read something or learn about eugenics, I'm transfixed by the horror of it all. I mean, our being US obsession with eugenics in the early part of the 1900s was a blueprint for Hitler and what he did, the terrible, terrible atrocities that happened in World War II and the Holocaust. And it's kind of like watching a car wreck for me. It's like watching something where you want to look away, you don't want to know about it, but you can't stop. You can't stop learning and watching. It's interesting. I really liked my breakdown of my thoughts on this that I did on Substack. So you can go back. I don't know exactly which weekly update it was in, but you can go and find that. I think that it was interesting. I mean, there's a lot of pieces of eugenics that even kind of seep into today, especially with the rolling back of Roe v. Wade and all of that. And anyway, so there's parts of this that are really fascinating, and the story of Anne Cooper Hewitt is very interesting. That her mother was able to basically decide without telling her that she was going to, sterilize her. And there's some question of whether or not the appendicitis that she had wasn't some sort of gastric upset that the mother induced in her so that she could have her sterilized. And the impetus for having her sterilized is that basically Anne Cooper Hewitt was the heir to a massive fortune, and if she didn't have a child, that fortune would revert back to her mother, and to some amount of that fortune would revert to her mother. And so there is a greed aspect of this. There's a lot of looking at how we categorized people through eugenics, and there's also a lot of talk about just involuntary sterilization that does still happen in modern day. Like, we like to think these things are from the past, but they're not in their rearview mirror, folks. Anyway, so this was interesting, but not like the best nonfiction book I've read, but it was interesting. I did really enjoy it in general. I read Northanger Abbey. There is a review for this on the channel because I'm doing a review for every Jane Austen that I read this year. I think right now the toss-up for next year's author is either it's between Edith Wharton, Virginia Woolf, and maybe Daphne du Maurier. So I may at some point closer to the end of the year do a little poll for that to get people's thoughts. But I've got some other really great ideas that people have thrown in the comments. So I mean, I've got like a longer list of stuff. So this can go on for a while. But anyway, I do really love Northanger Abbey. It's not my favorite Jane Austen by a long shot. It's not the best Jane Austen in any way, shape, or form, but it's a breath of fresh air. It is fun. It is a good time. It's very juvenile in her like writing style, but you can still see the skill and the wit, and there's still a lot of commentary on social commentary, like between people, like that socializing. I don't know how to say this. There's just good conversation. She's good at dialogue. That's what I'm trying to say. Anyway, I am tired. We've been doing manual labor for a couple days now, so I'm tired. I also finished my reread of Outlander, and I still loved it. 5 stars. Fantastic. I got no notes on this one. I love it. I'm sorry. I just love Outlander. I realized when I got to the end of this that I think I at least started Dragonfly and Amber one time, because there's things that I thought were from this book that are not. They're from Dragonfly and the Amber. Yeah. So I do need to read that, but that will probably be more like an August read. I don't think that I'm going to get there in July. I have a couple other things that I'm trying to read, and then Booker is going to be upon us, and so maybe not even July. This may even be like into fall when I pick that up. I still love it. I'm still hesitant on the rest of the series, but I did really love Outlander for like the 3rd time reading it. Out of nowhere, found this Substack account called the Virginia Woolf Reader or something like that. It's by this Tosh on Substack. I will send you, I will put a link to Tasha's page in the description box in case you also want to read Virginia Woolf. I'm waiting for their next post to see what's going to happen next with the feed, but I randomly came across this, and I randomly stumbled on this already in process June read along of Mrs. Dalloway. And I picked up within the first week of June and just started reading this. It wasn't originally sort of on my radar to read last month, and I still love this. This is my 3rd or 4th time reading Mrs. Dalloway. It is still phenomenal. I know that Stream of Consciousness is not for everybody, but I encourage you to give this a try if you've ever wanted to, especially if you read this kind of the way that we were reading it with this reading group. Tosh gave breakdowns every like quarter of the book or so, and there were some really interesting discussions happening about what this all means. There's such a wealth of things and commentary within Mrs. Dalloway. It's the kind of book that you can keep reading and pick up new things. I absolutely love it. My first time reading it, I was not this enthused, and then I kind of fell down this Mrs. Dalloway, Virginia Woolf rabbit hole, and then suddenly this spark was lit within me, and I had to know more. I had to read it again, and then I loved it, and then I kept reading it, and then I have the annotated one, and I have the Virginia Woolf Reader, and then I read other Virginia Woolfs, and I've just became a big fan of her. I want to get her, like, I think it's like a 5 or 6 volume collection of her diaries, but each volume, at least here in the States, appears to be like $40. So I can't quite justify that at this juncture, but maybe if you watch this entire video to the end and get it to be watched a lot, maybe I can afford the first volume of Mrs. Dalloway. That's not gonna happen, but a girl can try. Anyway, so I really enjoy it. I think that you should read it. I think it was great. Next up is Clear by Karis Davies. I'm kind of like middle of the road on this one. I think the writing is phenomenal. I think the relationship between these 2 men in the Highlands is beautifully done. So basically you have this priest, this reverend has to go clear this last remaining tenant off this island, the remote island in the Scottish Highlands, and his wife stays behind, and he goes, and they have no common language, and there's really no linguistic exact like pair, like, you know, like if you speak Spanish, sometimes it can be really easy to kind of speak this hybrid Spanish Portuguese, and you can speak to people from Portugal or Brazil, or like maybe you can kind of like fudge your way through Italian, and you can like, there's no like really good common language even to bridge between this reverend pastor man and this gentleman that's still living in this remote Scottish Highlands island. But he goes, they develop this relationship, they develop this way of communicating that's really beautiful to watch this play out. It's a very quiet book, it's a very slim book, and I love that part. I loved watching the 2 of them, and I loved watching how betrayals unfold. I loved it. And I kind of loved the aspects with the wife. The wife is kind of going to try to save her husband, and she's this very ballsy woman, and she's doing all these things to get access to like boats and land and to get to this island and to come and get her husband. And all of that, like the basic structure of the plot, I really enjoyed, and the writing was phenomenal. However, I think this is a case for me where this book was too slim and a little too quiet. I wanted a little bit more historical, like fleshing out. We're being plopped down in the middle of like two major historical events in Scotland, and maybe this is just something that is part of my like American naivete, but I don't feel like there was enough context given for the reader. And I don't know if everybody that reads in like an Anglo demographic knows enough about these two events that were happening, the clearing of the Scottish Highlands and this thing that happens with the Scottish church that I cannot remember the name of, and I'll probably put up on the screen. So I have a hard time. I have a hard time with this because at the end of the day, I felt like I needed a little more of something. And maybe if I went in with more historical context of my own in the background, it wouldn't feel like this. But unfortunately, I didn't. And so I felt a little like something was lacking. But it is beautifully written. I will read more from Kara Davies. I think that the writing is just spot on. And I do wonder actually if this could be a Booker book, because it's so quiet and it kind of gives me like the Colony vibes in some way. There are like, it's got like a thing that I feel like could be Bookerish, but I don't know. It might not be like big enough for Booker, but it does kind of have that like little book vibe. Like it has like a little Booker book vibe, little Booker book vibe. I can't say it. But anyway, moving on. Then I read A Good Life by Virginie Grimaldi, and this came from a Europa edition. So again, thank you, Europa, for sending this to me. I loved this. I have a review on the channel. This is about two sisters who were estranged, and they come together following the death of their grandmother, and they have to sort out the things that push them apart in the past. It talks a lot about mental illness. It talks about just like sibling relationships and bonds, and living inside of an abusive relationship with your own parent, and how that affects your bonds with your sibling. And it was so beautiful. I cried. I love this book. This was so good. I highly encourage you to read this, especially if you're someone who has a sibling. I would read this. I think that you will relate to a lot of the things that are in this. I think if you have a sister, this would be a fantastic read to read with your sister. It's sad, but also kind of life-affirming, and I loved it. We read Near to the Wild Heart by Clarice Lispector for TBR Lowdown, and we will be doing a discussion for this. Unfortunately, with me getting COVID and a few other things, we were not able to record some episodes at the very end of June before we went on hiatus. So that will be coming after we get back from our little summer break. But I loved this book. There will be a standalone sort of like mini review that I'm going to be filming after this. Clarice Lispector is just a genius. To have this be your debut novel is just astounding. She's such a wonderful writer. She's got such a unique voice. The things that she does with this book, the way that she just crafts this whole story, it's so flipping good. We are following Joanna. She is just this incredibly unconventional woman. She's a very creative, cerebral person, and she doesn't quite fit the mold of society. And you're just watching this woman struggle to find happiness, to articulate the thoughts and things that are inside of her so that they can like be given life. You watch her be judged by the people around her for being not like everybody else, for not fitting the mold. It's such a good read. It's so beautiful. Clarice Lispector she is a goddess. She's an absolute goddess. I've read all of her shorter works of fiction, so this is me reading all of her actual novels. So this is the beginning of that journey, and I don't even know how to like talk about her in any succinct way because there's just so much in here. So I'm really excited to talk about this with Naomi because I feel like we'll have a phenomenal discussion. This is the kind of book where you can talk as a group or with another friend about it, and the ideas that are going to get shared, and there's just so much in here. And at like, I think it's like 200 pages or so, it's remarkable how much is shoved into this wonderful book. So please read. Did I do a good enough job gushing over this? Please read this. It's phenomenal. We read The Expanse's book 8, Tiamat's Wrath, a couple of my friends and and I love this. This was a roller coaster. It is sad. It's the 8th in a series. It's the penultimate book in The Expanse, and I'm not going to spoil any of that for y'all, but I love this. Some things happened to one of my favorite characters, and I don't know how this is going to play out. I'm very nervous, but I'm also very happy that other things didn't happen to them. It was a very stressful read, and I have one more book to go, and we will be reading that this month, so I will finally wrap up The Expanse, which is going to make me sad. But what can you do? If you've never tried sci-fi, I think this is a really good series to start with. It's complete, it's good, it's fun. I highly recommend The Expanse. We read The Once and Future Witches for my little Patreon book club. If you want to join, there's a link down below. Basically for the book club, it's just over on Discord. I have a little discussion board over on Discord, and in any way that you join any of my things where you give me money, basically, as that's kind of, for now, the reward that I sort of have for that. I appreciate anybody who feels the need to give me like a Ko-fi, or join my Patreon, or join my Substack community, or whatever. It boggles my mind that anybody does that, but thank you. I appreciate it. So anyway, we do a little book club every other month over there. But anyway, so The Once and Future Witches by Alexis Harrow. I've had this on my shelf for a really long time, and I finally read it, and I did really enjoy it, but it is ultimately kind of like upper mid because I feel like the pacing of this was all wrong. It's a story of 3 sisters. They've been separated, and they end up all meeting up in New Salem, because Salem has burnt down, and it's this really like intersectionally feminist historical fantasy about, you know, women joining together and fighting for their rights and for their existence and for autonomy, etc. And I did really enjoy the messaging in this. I did enjoy the representation that is in this, but ultimately the pacing was very strange at times. It would speed up and slow down in weird ways, and I never got to really emotionally connect with anybody because of that weird pacing, but I did enjoy it. So it is worth the read, but I wouldn't like run out and go buy it. But I did enjoy it. On a lark, I put this as a Libby hold a long time ago, and weirdly, it took a long time for it to become available. It was unavailable for several months, and it finally popped up in my Libby holds, and I said, you know what? Let's just try it. And that's Violet Bent Backward Over the Grass, and that is Lana Del Rey's poetry collection from 2020, and I did not enjoy this, and it was very disappointing, in all honesty. I was expecting a musician and a singer-songwriter to give me like more in their poetry. I expect you to be able to play with metaphor more and play with lyricism and like the beat of the rhythm of these poems. And there was like very little of it. It wasn't bad, but like it wasn't what I had expected. I expected a bit more from Lana Del Rey, and that is probably my fault for expecting that. But ultimately, I did not really enjoy this. It wasn't doing anything really interesting for me. So unfortunately, that was a bust. But then I ended the month not on a bust, and that is Dayspring by Anthony Oliveria. And I talked about this in my most recent Substack from the beginning of July, and I absolutely adore this book. So this book plays with form, it plays with silence. There's pages that are just blank. It plays with time. It is the story of Christ and the beloved disciple John, though neither of them are actually mentioned like by name in this. But it is a queer love story, and as Anthony Olivieri puts it in an interview he did, which was phenomenal, by the way, with the Vancouver Library, he calls this finding queerness in religion. That is what this book is doing. It is finding queerness in religion. And this is a Christ that is not biblical Christ. This is a Christ who is a human being. He gets angry, he makes jokes, he sort of lies a little bit, he has sex, he has desires, he goes to the bathroom, he's a man. And he has this beautiful relationship with the beloved disciple, and it is gorgeous, and it says a lot about love, and how human Jesus is a figure of love, and is a figure that is staunchly anti-capitalism. That is not the Jesus that is co-opted by maybe evangelicals today or other people. It's just a really, really beautiful book. I think it's going to offend a lot of people, and I'm okay with that. I think that some people need to be offended. I adored it. It's beautiful. It also pulls in a lot of quotes and pieces and poems and snippets from different like religious writers, philosophers, theologians, etc. And there's a lot of like eroticism. It's a very different look at Christianity. It is beautiful. Please read this. I love this. I highly recommend the audiobook as well. I would read this along with the audiobook because the audiobook has multiple voices. Like when the devil comes up, it is this multi-voiced being, and it is beautifully done. I love this. This is definitely be one of my favorite books of the year. I love this so much. This came out this year as well. I need to get a copy of this physically for my shelves because this is going to be a favorite for a really long time. So that's everything I read in the month of June. So final thoughts. So that's everything I read. As I said already, I'm repeating myself. I do not think that I'm holding much over. No, I do have a couple books that I held over into July. I'm still reading Lies and Sorcery. I am finally getting back into it and like actually reading a bit. It's not just sitting there and staring at me and making me feel guilty for not finishing it. But that is the whole year I'm going to be reading that book. And I'm still making my way through the Mysteries of Udolpho. I meant to finish this by June, and I don't know why. I think I could have done that while I had COVID and everything else going on. But I will finish it because I've already DNF'd it once in my life, and I really would like to just finish it. But it's not interesting to me as a modern reader. I have looked at a few reviews of other people who really love Gothic literature who really loved this book, but for me, it's not the kind of Gothic literature that I enjoy. I think for Gothic literature, I can go back to like, say, a Wilkie Collins. And that works for me. That is great. When you go back to like 1794, it's really difficult for me to connect to the text. But it's fine. It's good. I guess. It is interesting. It's just maybe a little flowery for me. And then I very briefly started Ship of Destiny at the very end of June, but I really didn't make much headway until, the last couple days in Ship of Destiny, which is the third and final book in the Live Ship Traders series. So yeah, that's everything that I've read. I would love to know what you've been reading, what you've been loving. If you read any of these, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well as usual. Anyway, I'm gonna shut up and film a couple other things with this wonderful sound of power washing going on. But anyway, hopefully I can minimize it in editing, but I apologize to everybody who is wearing headphones through this entire video. This was probably just irritating, but if I don't do this now, I'm never gonna do it. So anyway, that is it. Thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video, whatever it may be, because it's my channel and I can do whatever I want. Bye.
So just sit with me, talking to the night until the morning, building chemistry.